Today on the Mushroom Hour podcast, we are graced by the presence of Chad Hyatt, author, chef, mushroom forager, all-around mycophile extraordinaire. Chad, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. It should be fun.
It will be really fun. And as I was saying, thank you for making the trip, because I love doing when we're sitting in person. You said, yeah, I'm sick of Zoom. I think we're all sick of Zoom.
Yeah, I'm still trying to recover from that whole COVID year or two of being everything on Zoom. So it's nice to be face to face.
Nice to be in the same magnetic, energetic field and exchange energy. But yeah, we were talking a little bit before the show about some of your adventures and misadventures into fungi. So there's so much to talk about. But why don't you kick us off with some of that backstory? I mean, you were talking about some prior lives, but what led you into the culinary world, into the world of fungi?
Okay, so I'll give you the shorter version, I suppose, because this show's only an hour, right?
The life story might be a couple episodes, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually got into mushrooms about the same time I switched careers and started cooking for a living. And I had gone at the time, and I mean, this is probably around 2008, something like that, plus or minus a year or two. I had gone to a dinner at some fancy restaurant down in the South Bay with my partner at the time, and it was a wild mushroom themed dinner. And I met somebody there who was the one providing mushrooms for the dinner. I spent a bunch of time talking to him, and he convinced me during the conversations that that it was pretty easy to go out and pick my own mushrooms if I wanted to cook mushrooms, pick my own wild mushrooms and cook them. He's basically, just buy this book, and he meant Mushrooms Demystified.
Of course.
And is, buy this book and just go out and start looking for mushrooms. And I pretty much did that. And I at first it was really challenging to identify something, but after the first, pretty much after one successful hunt, I was completely hooked. I got some intel accidentally that I don't think I was supposed to get about a porcini flush going on in Lake Tahoe area. Actually.
Overheard on the radio?
Not exactly on the radio, but it was like kind of an online discussion, and I don't think I was supposed to see it. And I convinced one of my friends at the time to take the day off work, and we just took off, and we went up there, and just right out of the car, porcini were everywhere. And from that moment on, it was like, okay, this is great.
That was the first hunt.
That was the first successful, going out. I think I had already started trying to identify some things and eat some different things I was finding. And it's funny, my first few mushrooms that I ate were ones that are usually not kind of beginner mushrooms, but
adventurous from the start.
Yeah. Well, it's, you get what's there.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
Cool. That was the first proper mushroom hunt, was stumbling on a ton of porcinis from stolen intel.
Yeah.
Top secret intel. It was funny. We were talking before the show too, where you were like trying to give me advice on this area here in the Sonoma County. And you were like, well, I got to be careful. I can't give away spots. That never goes away.
No.
The secret nature of mushroom hunting just will never leave us.
Yeah. And it's funny. These days, I'm not really protective at all of my spots, but when other people give me their spots or show me their spots or their special places, I'm pretty sensitive about not sharing those.
Very true.
And, these days, the way I hunt, I don't really care. I have one or two spots that are sentimental to me that I don't really share because I want to be able to go to them and still find mushrooms. But for the most part, I share all my spots with people.
I agree. When someone entrusts you with their spot, it's like, okay, that's a secret I'm not allowed to share. But you were saying to me that, now you get invited to other people's spots. So Chad is the author of an amazing wild mushroom cookbook, The Mushroom Hunter's Cookbook.
The Mushroom Hunter's Kitchen.
The Mushroom Hunter's Kitchen. And I mean, in this area, in the Bay Area, like Sonoma, Marin, South Bay, East Bay, I think you're really well known as like the mushroom aficionado. And you were like, yeah, well now that notoriety means that I get introduced to a lot more mushroom spots.
Yeah. And it's actually wider than that. I mean, I've kind of, because of the book, I've gotten to do mushroom events all over the country now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to a new place, whether it's in Oregon or Washington or Colorado or Wisconsin or Minnesota, wherever, and yeah, and people take me to their spots, and it's kind of magical. And for most people, when they're learning to do mushroom stuff, when they're learning to look for mushrooms, finding spots is probably the hardest part, and people are very protective, as you said. Just having people wanting to show me their spots now, that's probably the best part of people knowing who I am these days.
Right. Well, it explains part of your enlightenment. You're like, I care not if people have my spots. It's like, yes, because you have so many to choose from.
Yeah, it's really easy for me to be magnanimous when, when everybody wants to share with me.
That's right. Well, yeah, tell us about those early years then working with them culinarily, because we all know, like, there's that foraging aspect. There's getting keyed into a spot, getting some intel. You start to learn mushroom seasonality, habitat, how it works. Were you already getting into the culinary arts? Did mushrooms draw you into the culinary arts? And how did you start exploring working with fungi and food?
Again, I got into mushrooms and cooking for a living at the same time.
Yeah.
And definitely the culinary part is what drew me to mushrooms. The going out and being able to pick chanterelles and porcini by myself instead of having to pay lots of money for them was pretty exciting. So that's definitely what drew me in. And the first year when I went out, when I had that amazing porcini hunt by accident almost, turned into, that was in the early fall, I think. And then that rain season in the Bay Area was just a really big rain season. And so everywhere I went, there were chanterelles. And I thought, oh, this is easy.
Yeah.
Because every time I went out, I found a new chanterelle spot. Every time I went out, there were mushrooms. It was easy. And so I don't think I had to learn that much that first serious year.
Yeah.
And then the next, I think 3 or 4 years in a row were big drought years. And that's when I realized why they call it mushroom hunting instead of mushroom gathering, because it was a different game. And so that was kind of a big part of the evolution of me as a mushroom hunter. At first, again, I was very much just focused on the common edibles everybody was after, like chanterelles. And when there was no rain, suddenly it was any mushroom I found became exciting and interesting. So I had to learn to start really identifying everything. And I don't know if it was a pride thing or some competitive thing or something, but as I got better at identifying stuff, you look in the books and it's like, oh, this is supposedly edible. Nobody ever talks about it, but it's supposedly edible. So basically every time I got comfortable enough identifying a new mushroom, I would try eating it. And once upon a time, I was kind of known as the guy who would eat all the weird stuff. And I think in some circles, I've never really shaken that reputation.
Yeah. You kind of give off that vibe of like the adventurous mushroom guy, which of course, for anyone beginning or interested into this, I always recommend stick with those common edibles. Ignore anything with gills, like you have all those rules, but such a deep appreciation for those intrepid pioneers like yourself who are willing to cook and eat and try different things. Well, and it's interesting thinking about, context, right? If you're talking about 2008, this is before the giant mushroom boom that we have now.
Yeah. And so there were a lot less resources. Now, there's so many good resources online. There's so many good books now. At that time, it was basically mushrooms demystified. If you're out west and if we're in the east, there was the Audubon one with the Gary Linkoff thing. But out west here, it was basically just mushrooms demystified, which is still a tremendous, amazing book if you want to get deep into understanding all the specifics about every mushroom you're seeing. It's still the best book. Yeah, but it's not a book that when you look at how modern books, it's funny to say 15 years ago or whatever is not modern books, but the printing has gotten so much cheaper for color pictures now that the books have lots and lots of color pictures. You can go online and cross-reference pictures. Then you were going off these little black and white pictures that I think that's what I got here. You got really good at reading the descriptions and comparing them to other things.
Yeah. Well, and that was still the era of dichotomous keys.
Yeah, which I'm not a plant person, so I never got good at dichotomous keys. They drove me nuts.
Yeah, where it's like, does it have this or does it have this? Yes, I'm pretty inept at that. So when people switch to more like descriptive, here's big, beautiful pictures, almost like dumbing it down a little bit. I'm like, yeah, okay, now I can get this. But I think many of us were drawn in by David Arora and his giant morel on the cover of Mushrooms Demystified. Yeah, it's still an amazing book.
Yeah, and yeah. So which version? So the version of Demystified I have has the prince on the front, actually.
Oh, okay.
But it's quite possible there's the other one has a morel on it. So David, I mean, was actually a big part of me getting so known in the community too. I always like to give him credit, actually. I mean, besides his book, all of us, before probably about 8 years ago or something, all of us learned from Demystified out west.
Yeah.
And so everybody who knows mushrooms, that was the Bible. But I had been working as a chef, and I was active with mushrooms, but I was never really involved in the community much because my work commitments as a chef, I'm working on weekends, I'm working at night, so
right.
There was no time
free time. Yeah.
No time to do stuff. Basically, I had a day off. I'd go out in the woods, but that was mostly by myself. But I kind of just fortuitous sequence of events. I left a job in, I think it was, summer of 2015. I left a job where I was a head chef someplace, and a job where I'd been working, 80 to 100 hours a week. So not going to be doing mushroom events. Yeah. And David, shortly after I left the job, just out of the blue, asked me if I was, he knew me from some online group at the time, like Yahoo groups, before we had like Facebook and other social media.
That's a deep cut. The Yahoo
groups. There was a Yahoo group that was very active that had a lot of well-known people, including David, in it. He had invited me to help him do the food at one of his Thanksgiving events, where he's been doing these Thanksgiving mushroom things for decades. And the one time he asked was the one time over the course of years that I actually could have said yes because I was available. Yeah. And going there, I got to know him. I had met him briefly, but I didn't really know him. So I got to know him a little bit, and I got to know a bunch of other people in the mushroom community, and through those people got to know a bunch of other people in the mushroom community, and all of it was just because of this introductions from David and him opening up doors. And even just the book came out of stuff that started with that Thanksgiving thing, and I wound up doing a couple more of those Thanksgiving things with him afterwards, but all of it started because he's really good at connecting people.
Yes. As a lot of mushroom people are, he's biomimicking the mycelium. It's almost like an old trope now, but yeah, it is true. And with David, it's funny you say that about the Thanksgiving events, because I find some of myself in that story. When I first got into mushroom foraging, I kind of pulled my now wife along for the ride and was like, you need to come do this too. But classic, she always does things to a very kind of high level and isn't afraid to like reach out to people and really push limits. So she like reached out to that studio in Gualala, 314 Studio. I'm forgetting the name, or I think that's it. Anyway, she was like inquiring about this mushroom event where they were going to host a talk, and got herself basically into one of those Thanksgiving events with David Arora. Yeah. So we were able to go up to his like little hobbit hideaway up there in Mendocino.
His place so is cool. Probably the best mushroom museum in the world, and it just happens to be his house.
It is. It's like this great fungarium.
Yeah. It's what year were you guys there?
We were there probably in 2017. So
it was 2017. You might have seen me there.
It could be.
Because I was there, I think, 15, 16, and 17, I think, if I'm remembering right.
Okay, I might have been there, because I remember going out. We all went out and picked... I don't know if I can give away the secret of the Sea Ranch Dog Park, but we all went out and picked mushrooms in Sea Ranch, went back to his place, and he, in that backyard area, just kind of held court over this table where we put out all of our specimens. And he was identifying and telling stories about, here's how you tell this Matsutake from, the Amanita, squeeze the base of the Matsutake. Yeah. Was just doing the big demonstration. And then I feel like I would have Yeah, well, he cooked some over the fire and had us try, like, oh, actually, Suillis, the slippery jack, is really good if you try it. So, yeah, that definitely kicked me into another layer of, like, wanting to do more with mushrooms.
Yeah, and that was the thing. When I went to David's thing, I was the food guy.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was, a mushroom geek, but I wound up hanging out there with people who were infinitely more knowledgeable about mushrooms than I was, and just to try not to look like an idiot, I had to up my game. And so it would start hanging out in the circles with people like that. And it's, because of the food thing and because I knew some mushroom stuff and was a chef, I started getting invited to do all these events. And I had to learn just to survive. I had to learn so much more. So,
well, and it's funny coming at it. So we're talking about like mycology community, David Arora, all these mushroom nerds getting together. But then how does that chart your course on the culinary side? Because you start doing all these events. Did you like, I'm going to go out and open a mushroom restaurant? Or how does that affect that side?
So
those people probably all know you as, oh, that's Chad, the crazy mushroom guy. The mushroom people are like, oh, that's the food guy.
Yeah,
the food people
exactly.
are like, that's the crazy mushroom guy.
That's actually exactly how it is in a lot of circles I'm in. So again, starting with that first time at David's, I met some friends, Thea Chesney, and I don't know if you know Thea.
She's been on the show.
Oh, yeah, fantastic mushroom person. She's one of my good friends. And I met her there. She was on staff that week too.
She hit me to the Klamath mountain ranges, yeah. Or Klamath, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember we just started hanging out and going out and doing mushroom stuff and just cooking and eating and drinking together all the time. And my wife and I were we're driving with her and her partner at the time, in the spring of right after that first Aurora time. And we were on our way just to go on a morel hunt somewhere. And I was complaining at the time about how I was just unhappy that there were no good resources for mushroom cooking stuff. Like I have millions of cookbooks, and at that time, like the online thing isn't as much as it is now, but it was still a pretty massive space full of resources. But I was just complaining that I couldn't find stuff. And she pretty much told me, well, why don't you do it?
Make the resource you need.
Yeah. And I couldn't weasel my way out of that with any kind of reasonable excuse. And that kind of was the impetus for the book, actually.
Wow.
And so that I was like, shortly after that, I pretty much within a few days of that, I started writing the initial stubs that turned into the book, and, just researching recipes and playing with stuff. And so it all started out of that. But I swear this comes back to your question.
Yeah.
So at the time, I was working in this corporate kitchen, and it gave me a lot of corporate, meaning like cooking for some company.
Yeah.
And it was actually not like a Google sort of situation. It was a very small space with me and one other person who worked really well together, and we had room to be totally creative and free every day.
Oh, that's nice.
And so I would just start bringing all my mushrooms into work, and I would just like play with recipes
Test kitchen.
Yeah, it pretty much was. And so that a lot of that turned into recipes, and a lot of the recipes in the book were things I would just bring into work and play with.
Thank you to the office staff for being my guinea pigs.
Yeah.
The forward. Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, when the book came out, I was taking some time off right around the time the book came out, and I was thinking that doing what I do, I make a few phone calls, I have a job. I wasn't really worried. It's like, I'm going to take some time off. When I'm ready to work again, I'll have a job. So I took a few months off, and the book came out, and I figured, I'm going to promote the book a little bit, and we'll see where it goes. I'll do some events. And so the book came out. People liked it, thankfully.
Right.
And
well received.
Yeah. So it turned into me doing a lot of mushroom events in the moment. And I had already done a few mushroom events, but once the book came out, I was doing mushroom events everywhere. And just as the food guy. Sometimes I was doing dinner, sometimes I was just doing kind of, cooking demonstrations. But it just one thing led to another. the mushroom events led to people hiring me to do mushroom dinners in places. And so pretty soon I just realized I didn't, after a while, it's like, wow, it's been a while and I still haven't gone back and gotten a job. So I guess I'm just going to keep doing this until I have to not do that. The mushroom thing actually turned into me getting all these gigs cooking for whoever. It just kind of snowballed, and those gigs, the mushroom gigs, turned into gigs that weren't mushroom gigs with cooking. The mushroom turned into me working for myself, freelancing as a chef, just doing private events, again, which these days only a fraction of are mushroom gigs. Still now, people know me and they go, "Oh, we need to do a mushroom thing. Bring him in." Yeah,
we have Chad.
Yeah, and it's fun. I've got. And now I get to go all over the place for it. It's so I'm going to do a mushroom dinner in Telluride in August, and then I'm going to do another one, which is Colorado, and then I'm going to do another one in the mountains of Arizona in the week after that. And I think actually the week before Telluride, I'm doing, some cooking events in Santa Cruz. So the mushrooms have fed the food thing, and the food thing feeds the mushroom thing, and they kind of take me all over the place now. It's really fun.
I mean, a beautiful cycle that you've gotten into there.
Yeah.
And, we were talking a little bit before about like the proliferation of mushroom culture. And that's a huge thing, is you have more mushroom clubs, more people interested. There's now more of a demand for people that know how to treat these very unique food products in the kitchen. And that's something I'm hugely curious about, is how do you decide to start playing with mushrooms? Because there's like some rules of thumb and a lot of the recipes. So this is like a lot of my context is right before your book and other books come out, and you're trying to figure out what to do, and paired with the fact that I'm not super handy in the kitchen. So like I'm seeing recipes that involve a lot of cream and now I've had this show and I've had to interview people who have given their basic tips, but I'm curious, as someone who is kind of like this culinary mushroom maestro, it's like, what things do you play with? Because you said, I got things and just started messing around.
So I think the cream thing is kind of a trigger for me.
Yeah.
So one of the things that really bothered me that kind of led to me writing the book in the first place was I felt that so much of the conventional wisdom and common knowledge that everybody had about mushrooms seemed like it was straight out of the like 1950s kind of Betty Crocker style of cooking. And I always tell people there's a time and a place for that. It's fine, but that's not the kind of cooking I'm doing on a regular basis. It's not the kind of food I want to eat every day these days. So I wanted to do food that wasn't just, make a roux, make a cream sauce, whatever. And so that was a big part of the book, is trying to break out of that mold. So yeah, I'm very much, as far as playing with things, where to start is, what do you like to cook, and then how do you fit the mushrooms into them? So
I was going to say, it probably blends with your culinary inspirations and things that you naturally have anyway. Trying to use those same flavor profiles and things that you like.
Yeah, and it's I think that a big part of what I really started to learn then, and I mean, I've probably gone even deeper into these days, is that instead of saying, I have mushrooms, what's the right way to deal with the mushrooms? It's more like, okay, I feel like cooking this kind of stuff. How do the mushrooms fit in? So whatever kind of cuisine or whatever kind of dishes is driving you or is inspiring you in that moment, there's usually a way to fit it in. And mushrooms can do a lot more than what people think of them as traditionally. And actually, right around the time I started working on the book, my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, who lives in Catalonia, northeastern Spain.
Yeah.
And crazy mushroom culture there.
Really?
So they're intensely obsessed with mushrooms in that culture.
Okay.
More than probably anywhere else in Western Europe.
Wow. All right.
And it's just everywhere. wild mushrooms, like people in the city, you talk to random city people and they go out and they go mushroom hunting.
And Catalonia is like famously its own kind of subculture already. So
yeah,
very mycophilic. Interesting.
Yeah. And so she and her family were vacationing somewhere in the Catalan Pyrenees. And it was an area that is actually very well known for mushrooms, very well known for mushroom hunting. And they were staying in this little bed and breakfast kind of place that makes all their own like preserves and jams and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent us a few of these preserves that they make with local stuff, and they were made with different mushrooms. Instead of fruits and stuff, they were made with mushrooms. And these are sweet preserves. And I had never seen stuff like this before, and it blew my mind. And it made me kind of reconsider a lot of what I thought I could do with mushrooms. And so I started playing with stuff like that. With one of the things I love showing people is just making a jam out of black trumpets. And it's super good. It's super easy. One of my favorite things to do is there's another preserve I like to make with Matsutake and figs. And that one came about in a very odd way, but it's just delicious. Yeah. And I would put it on anything.
What's the story with Matsutake and figs? Because that's a wild mixture. I mean, like you said, when you say mushroom jam, like, yeah, we know candy caps. But those are kind of like, but you're pushing the boat out from candy caps.
Yeah, candy caps are great.
Yeah, but we're doing sweet things with mushrooms that I don't think of anywhere in the spectrum of.
Yeah, and that's when you say to do things with, what to do with mushrooms. I brought it up specifically as just, what do you want to do with mushrooms? It's really, you can make them work in almost any context. It's just getting to know the personality of the one you have and how to handle it. But anyway, the Matsutake and fig, it was just kind of a silly story where I have friends in the mushroom community that some people don't have, but I have a friend who runs a wholesale business.
Yeah.
And he called me up one day and he said, I have 5 cases of Matsutake buttons and they're starting to turn and I need somebody to help me go through them all and throw out the ones that are bad and clean up the ones that are good. And if you help me do it, you can have as many as you want. And
Chad's, I'm your guy. I'm your fixer.
Yeah. So he came over our house with cases of Matsutake buttons. And my wife and I sat there and went through them all. And it just so happened that I guess it was early fall and we had a fridge full of figs. There's lots of things I like to do with Matsutake, but that day it was like, I don't know how to use all of these. I'm going to try something crazy.
Yeah.
And just put the Matsutake and figs together into this kind of jam because I knew they were starting to turn again. So I needed to use them. I needed to preserve them.
Right.
And I made a small batch of this stuff as a test and it was so good that I made a huge batch of it. and it's one of those things now that it's one of the standard things I always do when I have a lot of Matsutake now.
I love that story because it's like the vehicle of creativity, just throwing stuff together. Now, obviously, you've got a little bit of a culinary eye, but culinary instinct to know what might go well together and what flavors might carry. But for the folks like me that are kind of, what do we want to say, cooking illiterate, how do you make a Matsutake and fig jam? Is it just cooking it all down in water until it...
Yeah, so making jams so there's 2 questions here to unpack. The first one is how do you come up with something like this when you have ingredients? That's a deeper question.
Right.
The how to make a jam, like how to make a trumpet jam, how to make a Matsutake fig jam. The Matsutake fig jam really is clean and cut up your Matsutake, clean and cut up your figs, a little bit of sugar and a little bit of vinegar, a little bit of water just to help the stuff kind of come together and just cook it down in a pot. And then just like hit it with an immersion blender to puree it up when the stuff's kind of broken down a little bit. But that's it.
So I started with the simple mechanistic question, but yeah, let's plumb the depths of that little bit deeper question. Is it as simple as like the fat, salt, heat, that little wheel or?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I don't necessarily think of it exactly that way, but I don't suggest that you come up with recipes by throwing darts at a board and seeing like what pops out. I think that if you know you like certain, as you get to know certain ingredients, you get to know what kind of things make them shine, what kind of things don't. So you know that if you're using something, it might benefit from more acid, so you might want to bring in some lime juice or something. You know, if you're using something else, it can be a little bit bitter, so I might put in some caramelized onions to kind of smooth it out. It's so much of it is, and sometimes a lot of the recipes and a lot of coming up with new things is starting with some traditional recipe and going, well, what if I put mushrooms in instead of this?
Yeah.
And going, well, in this traditional recipe, what is this ingredient actually doing that I'm trying to replace? Can the mushroom do that? And sometimes it's just, there's times it's just bulk where, there's a recipe in my book that I love showing people that is about, Rusula brevipies is just it's the mushroom that, becomes at least lobster. Out west, exactly, becomes lobster mushrooms that gets parasitized, and everybody talks about how Rusula brevipies is no good to eat, but lobsters are great. I honestly don't find much of a difference between them, but that's another conversation.
Interesting.
But you can just basically boil the brevipies and use it instead of chickpeas to make hummus. And so you're not getting any flavor really from the brevipies, from the Rusula brevipies.
It's just a fibrous vehicle.
But yeah, exactly. It's just a bulk. It's a vehicle. It's bulk. It's fiber. It's substance. And all the flavor in the hummus is coming from the tahini and the garlic and the lemon and the olive oil, right? So who cares? You have a bland mushroom you didn't know what to do with. All of a sudden, you're using it for the substance there.
Well, and that's what's so interesting. Hearing anyone who's familiar with food, like everything else, it breaks down to like a theory. And you start seeing the food as these like different building blocks with their own unique properties that you start blending a little more consciously. And mushrooms must be an interesting piece because they can be bulk, but then they can have wild flavor profiles and textures.
Absolutely. I mean, mushrooms have just a whole huge array, a huge spectrum of flavors, of aromas, and things that, I mean, even colors, like things that you don't get from other things in nature. And I brought up the bulk thing because I think people get so hung up sometimes on I have to use this to get the special flavor out of it, and sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes that's not its purpose. But and I use the hummus as the example of that. But yeah, of course, you want to use there's so many interesting flavors and aromas. I mean, I brought up Matsutake, and it's got this crazy, spicy, musky essence to it that some people love, some people hate it. There's not a lot of in between, but I love using that. It's just such an interesting flavor that I don't know where else to get any flavor remotely like that anywhere in nature.
And now that you bring up that Matsutake fig, it's like, it is almost that spiced aroma that you would pair with something like fig. So as you're saying that, I can kind of see that blend. I just want to remind people you're listening to KPCA 103.3 here in Petaluma. You're listening to the Mushroom Hour. We're speaking with Chad Hyatt, who's obviously an accomplished chef, mushroom head, mushroom hunter, talking about building mushrooms into your food. And when I try to sound smart talking about food, I often tell people that of like, no, I need to get the essence or flavor. I need to make the ingredient shine. And I love your grounded approach. Like sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just a constituent piece. I mean, there's times where it's all about the aroma. Actually, that Matsutake fig jam is exactly like you said. It becomes the spice. It's also the bulk, though. You're getting a lot of bulk from it, but it also becomes almost this gingery kind of spicy background in the thing that you trying to explain to people that that's a mushroom when they eat it, it doesn't really register. That's so cool. That's so cool. So you got inspired by Catalonian culture to kind of infuse, to make your own version of that. Now, for your food, kind of, I don't want to say like preferred food culture, but what are your current inspirations when you look at like what kind of food to make? Do you ever say, all right, I'm really in a Thai kick right now, or and then you kind of make something to adapt to that? Do you have one go-to type of like tradition that you kind of stick with a lot of the time, or?
So I like to think of myself as versatile.
Yeah.
So I'm all over the place. But I actually recently, that we were talking about it off the air a bit. My wife is a Spaniard. She grew up in Barcelona, and so I actually have been kind of immersed in Catalan culture and some other regional parts of Spanish culture. So I've been digging pretty deep into that and finding a lot of inspiration in that recently. And actually, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm working right now on a second edition of the Mushroom Hunter's Kitchen. And when I'm done with that, I actually I had started working and was pretty deep into a book about kind of regional Spanish food. So that's a subject I'm super excited about. And I think there's so much there that so few people know anything about outside of that area, really.
Right.
I find it really interesting because on the one hand, it's really simple, straightforward food about just have good ingredients and let them shine. And on the other hand, there's just like crazy ingredient combinations that Americans would never do. So
yeah, well, I want a little culinary journey, but just when you say that, I feel like some of that cuisine's emerging, because I think of like the Basque region, which I don't know if that's strictly Spanish or kind of in between. But yeah, then you have Catalonia, you have all these interesting traditions to pull from. Yeah. And then my brain thinks, oh yeah, tapas, but that just means like small food. That's not necessarily like flavor combinations. So what are some of those interesting combinations that our American palates aren't used to?
Well, so let me start by saying, so Basque is definitely Spain. Basque region is mostly in Spain, but it crosses over a little in France. And it's Spain in particular is hyper regional. It's, what we know of as Spain is, I think, younger than what we know of as the US. I mean, there's actually 5 national languages in Spain, not just Spanish.
Yeah. Okay.
And so every region has its own history and its own culture, its own cuisine, and a lot of them have their own language. So you move from region to region and there's a lot of different stuff. Catalan stuff, they really love combining meat and seafood. That's one thing I find really amusing. They'll use and not like the stereotypical American of surf and turf with a piece of meat over here and over here's a piece of lobster. Like
right.
They'll cook the squid in with the pork. You get these weird combinations, or there's one traditional Catalan recipe where it's like shrimp in a chocolate sauce. I mean, there's crazy things. Like, I mean, from the mushroom part of it, I think I got drawn into it originally because there's just so much mushroom stuff in it.
Really? So they celebrate the mushrooms in a lot of their dishes.
Yeah, I have a bunch of Catalan cookbooks at this point, and in them you'll see there'll be recipe after recipe that's calling out mushrooms, and I mean wild mushrooms. Like this one has this hygrophorus in it. This one has this tricoloma in it that they like there.
Okay.
And I mean, like, and this is just in like their equivalent of like The Joy of Cooking. This is not in a mushroom cookbook. It's they're pretty serious about it. So it's fun just to see them using things like that. Just to bring it back to the mushrooms that people here, like experienced mushroom hunters here, don't even play with. And there it's like, oh, every home cook knows that mushroom.
Yeah, well, see, and that's so interesting about that kind of difference culturally. And do you see some of that shift happening here? Because I think there was a kind of a moment where foraged foods, maybe that moment has just continued. I mean, I feel like the moment has kind of continued from when people started taking like the classic one that I think for anyone who watched a bunch of Netflix or something is like Noma, right? You have these traditions of like foraged food and mushrooms that in that case born from Europe, but then you started seeing it pop up a lot more here in the US with chefs being really into foraging and things like that. Do you see us moving more toward that culture where it won't be like, oh, that's the weird chef Chad who's really into mushrooms, but we'll start seeing this just as a bigger part of our cuisine as kind of all these other areas that we talk about on the show change with increased kind of cultural relevance of mushrooms?
Yeah, I think that
We won't become Catalonia overnight.
No. I mean, and Catalonia is like, I mean, I don't think anybody's like the Eastern Europeans. Like the Russians and their obsession with mushrooms is another level altogether.
Yeah.
But I think there's, I don't think you're ever going to see that level of wild mushroom interest, in Chipotle or in, the Olive Garden or whatever. But I think that you're already starting to see it in some restaurants. I know chefs in various parts of the US, including the Bay Area, who are very serious foragers.
Yeah.
And there used to be probably less than 5 in the whole country
who would actually
go out and forage. Like, I mean, maybe there was a guy, a few people who would go forage morels or ramps or something, but now all over, I just from mushrooms, I know people in probably 5 different states, and I know a bunch of restaurants now, even in the Bay Area, where I have chef friends who are going out and they're foraging and getting ingredients themselves that they're bringing back to the restaurant, and it's super exciting. Because when the chefs are doing it, their audience is obviously being introduced to it and opened up to it, I think.
Well, and it's interesting too to have the chefs get that level of engagement, because I know, there's a lot of changes potentially with the whole wild mushroom pipeline, right? With like licensing movements and movements that go for those wholesale kind of professional pickers, and how that eventually works its way down to restaurants. Having chefs get really engaged with that process and even just understand that process better probably has a lot of positive outcomes. I mean, I asked about like, are more chefs going to be doing this? Yes, probably more in this like fine dining or specialty space. But then just those chefs who already do it or interested in getting more educated is going to have a huge benefit to avoiding like, worst case scenario, they give the wrong mushroom to someone, or they're just something about the quality along the way. I mean, I
hugely
think positive.
I think for me, it's a few things. I think it can only be positive the more chefs get interested in it. I think one of the biggest impacts in my life that mushrooms had for me personally was really connecting me to where food comes from. And it's not just much. When you're going out and you're picking mushrooms, you obviously know where your mushrooms are coming from, but it made me just hyper aware of where everything else was coming from. It made me aware of where different vegetables were coming from. It made me aware of where my meat was coming from, where my fish was coming from. It just getting connected on that level just with the mushrooms made me want to get connected, made me want to understand with those other things. And I think it's the same thing for most people who start picking their own mushrooms. They start seeing similar things. And I think that, I mean, you said fine dining. It's very much fine dining, I think, was kind of leading into that, leading the movement into that, to using wild mushrooms. But there are actually these days a fair number of people who are doing it in much more casual, affordable, approachable food, not just super expensive fine dining situations. And that I think that's great, because those kind of things bring more people into it. And it's not even, for me, it's exciting, of course, when people are interested in mushrooms, but I think what excites me more than anything is just getting people paying attention to where their food comes from. And I think the more people who are putting that forward, the more you have a movement towards that.
That is an amazing output and a fantastic insight. And as you said that about like, I don't know if it's all fine dining, my brain kicks in and I'm like, yeah, of course not. We have a restaurant right here in town who works with Wine Forest Foods, and he's serving like hedgehog toast. And it's a very casual, like sit down, self-serve restaurant. So yeah, we're seeing that proliferation. And I think for a lot of people that work with mushrooms in different disciplines, if it's science, if it's the culinary, it draws you a little bit deeper into the discipline of everything, because mushrooms are so kind of intimately connected. They seemingly draw you into whatever you're interested in. If you got interested in through mushrooms, your awareness suddenly expands to all these other things. So that's an amazing point.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And the mushrooms, there's a million kind of, at this point, overused expressions and puns and jokes about, the spreading out and like mycelial network and
I
stuff.
overuse it all the time.
But I mean, it's amazing how mushrooms do connect you to everything else. I have a network all over the country now because of mushrooms, and a lot of it has nothing to do with food these days.
Yeah.
So many of my friends in the mushroom community are science people.
Yeah. Yeah, talk about that a little bit, how you've been drawn into some of this world of genetics, because we were talking a little bit before, and you were just busting out knowledge about, clades and some phylogeny. I mean, we're going to put the caveat that you said, like, I'm not the science.
So I am...
But you've taken the journey into these realms.
Yeah, I'm very much not the science guy. I mean, I actually, here's a tangent. I have a degree in physics, but...
Okay, you're totally the science guy. What are we talking about?
But I haven't used that in decades. So don't ask me to do any serious math right now.
Right.
But anyway, like I said, when I came into mushrooms, when I came into the mushroom community and started getting known in the mushroom community, I came in as the food guy.
Yeah.
And I was suddenly put into the circle where I was the food guy surrounded by all the science guys and women, not just men. It's actually one thing I appreciate. And one thing I appreciate in the mushroom community is it is a very inclusive community. But anyway, I was surrounded by all the science people, and I just wanted to keep up and be able to speak intelligently with these people. And I found a lot of these people very interesting. Some of them are still good friends of mine. And so I just started learning things to keep up. I do not pretend to know much of anything about the genetic studies. With me for mushrooms, I have certain groups of mushrooms I'm interested in. And so I pay attention when there's new information, and when the science goes somewhere, people learn something about them, I pay attention. And there's a lot of groups that I just kind of, my eyes glaze over and I go cook something.
That's almost how you have to approach something as vast as mushrooms. Is like you try to take it all in. We can't. It's biological infinity. So I like that approach of like, hey, I just got familiar with certain species, and those are my people. That's my little mushroom tribe that I keep track of. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and it's actually, it's taking this conversation a different direction, but I spend a lot of time these days trying to teach people about mushrooms and how to identify mushrooms, how to forage for mushrooms. And one of the big things is people get so wrapped up in having to learn a million mushrooms at once. And I think it's if you want to learn mushrooms, start with stuff that's easy for you to identify. Start with stuff that's distinctive to you. As you get comfortable with one or two, you find another one or two that are distinctive to you. You learn them well. And pretty soon you start having a bigger and bigger group. And the more you know, the more easy it is to kind of branch out. Don't get so hung up on learning every detail of every mushroom. For me, I've always approached it as just kind of putting them into groups. I want to just know what genus something is in. When I'm out looking for mushrooms, if I can put it in a genus and say, okay, this is an agaricus, this is a tricoloma, whatever, then I'm good. If it's a group that I'm interested in, then I'll dig into it and I'll get down to species. I'll learn as much as I can about that mushroom. But the more you can just put stuff into groups like that, put stuff into a genus, you can go anywhere in the world and you can know the mushrooms. If you're so hung up on just, I have to learn this specific mushrooms, this specific mushroom, it's really hard to transfer that, and it's really hard to learn more.
Yeah, well, it's like you're interested in Catalonia, Spain. I don't need to know every Catalonian. I know this region. So yeah, we need to kind of, I like that. We need to organize, and there's no, it's no mistake that that's exactly how taxonomy is organized for that reason.
Yeah. And it's just that there's groups there's friends of mine are super interested in certain groups, and I find them mind-numbingly boring and uninteresting. And there's other groups that are exactly the opposite, that they have no interest in, and I get super excited by them. So
yeah,
it's...
Well, yeah, mushrooms naturally kind of draw you into all of these fields. And for the foraging side of it, I mean, we're in the Bay Area. We talked about that. Obviously, you go a little bit further afield. Where are the Chad Hyatt kind of foraged regions? If we were going to get super non-specific, so you're not giving away anyone's secrets, but when you go out, let's say you have a mushroom dinner coming up, maybe they supply it, but if you're going out to pick the wild mushrooms, you want to start getting into your culinary, vibe. Where do you go? Where do you start looking? How do you start looking? Give us some of that, of how you approach a mushroom forage at this point.
So how do I approach one? I'm a little different than most people when I go out foraging these days, because I think most people, they go, I want to find Matsutake. So in this area, Matsutake is going to be with tan oak trees. I'm looking for tan oak habitat. And that is the way most people are taught to hunt mushrooms. So there's nothing wrong with that.
This is usually what I do.
Yeah, this is what most people do. Me personally these days, I have days when I do that, but most of the time I go, this is nice forest, I wonder what's there. So my ID skills are good enough now, and my list of things that I'm happy to eat is much longer than most other people.
Very true.
So I just kind of go out and find a nice place to wander around in the woods, and what's there is there. And I just kind of enjoy whatever mushrooms are growing. That's the way I hunt usually these days. There are days, don't get me wrong. Tomorrow, probably, I'm going to go up to the Sierra Nevada and look for morels. And I probably have a trip up maybe to Oregon or something in a week or two to do the same.
Yeah.
But for me, what's most enjoyable is not having to go a million miles to find a specific habitat. I've done a lot of that in my life, and it's fun. Yeah. If you're into mushrooms, I think everybody should go on some crazy road trip to find one mushroom that they really wanted to go hunt.
Yeah.
But I think for me, a lot of what's fun these days is just finding places close to where I am that I can just wander into the woods. That's kind of coming full circle a little bit, I think, for me, because I was always an outdoors person, and I used to, see how much ground I could cover, backpacking and stuff. And then I got into mushrooms, and I'd be out in the woods for 10 hours and go a mile.
Yeah, right. Walking in a small circle, making sure you're capturing everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now it's kind of back to just going out into places that I like and just seeing what's there. And that's a big way of how I hunt now.
That's a beautiful cyclical, because I think a lot of people start, or I tell people a lot of times to start, go out in the woods, just go like you normally would hike, see what's out there.
Yeah.
Right. And then start getting familiarized with the local, like the couple species of edibles that grow in your area that you can start keying into. And then a lot of people transition to, I know those chanterelles. I'm just going to kind of focus on those. And some of that's limited time. I'm going to make sure I always get this one that I'm looking for. And then you reach this next stage, like you're talking about, Chad, where you get good enough. You start learning, your vocabulary gets big enough. Like, cool, I can just go into any forest again and I'll find something. And that local piece, I think, is huge with a lot of foragers I speak with, is, not overlooking mushrooms in your local area, not feeling like you have to drive super far afield. But because we have a couple minutes left, maybe take us on one of the crazy journeys. One of the Chad Hyatt. I mean, you've already given us some, but one of the, I went in search of this certain mushroom up in, who knows, like Alaska or something. And I went to look for these and we found them. Because as much as it's awesome to do locally, like you said, there is a place for the call to mycological adventure.
What comes to mind is all the stupid situations I've gotten myself into more than anything.
That's why it's fun. Yeah, it could be a trip you tell us about where you went to find something and didn't find anything, and instead,
there's a story I wrote about in my book, actually, when I went on a morel hunt. I don't remember what year. This is probably around 2016 or 17, and I if you don't know about morel hunting in the West, I mean, you have what you call naturals that are just growing, usually with fir trees in the mountains,
right?
But grow with other trees at lower elevations. But for the big picks where you're trying to get poundage of morels, you're usually going out into far, like, wilderness areas. A lot of them are just, old logging roads and things like that. And muddy, unmaintained logging roads. And I was out. This was long before my wife and I were married, and I'm kind of amazed that she ever saw me again after this. But we went on a drive out in the Sierra Nevada somewhere into this fire area to look for morels, and we were way out there. I don't know. We were 15 miles off of whatever main road, and most of that down kind of unpaved roads. See, like, maybe you're lucky you see a car every hour or something.
Right.
And weren't finding much and wanted to go a little bit further, and there was a snowdrift across the road. And this is in my old Honda Element, which was not the greatest off-road vehicle.
I was going to say, that's a capable off-road vehicle. Plow into that drift.
Yeah, so it was, on the other side of that drift was a much shorter route back to civilization, even if there were no more morels, and I really didn't want to go back the other way, and I convinced my wife not wife at the time, but I convinced her that, yeah, we can make it, and I kind of, and it was, I say drift, it was like patchy drift that went for about probably like 50 yards or something. I don't remember off the top of my head.
So 50 yard, I see.
And like it started with this big kind of hump of snow, and I'm like, I screw it, let's do it.
Yeah.
And I went up on there and got on there, started moving down the drift to freedom, and just sunk right in and stopped. And we had not seen anybody for a long while. I get out of the car, like, I'm in trouble. I realized I had sunk in right where somebody else had gotten stuck. And looking around, and it's like, I got food, I got water, I got stuff to stay warm. We might be here for a few days while we wait for this to melt. And right about the time I'm giving up, somebody comes by with a shovel in hand.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We hadn't seen anybody. This is the middle of nowhere, and this guy just walks by, and he happens to be carrying a shovel. Okay, that was odd. And then all of a sudden somebody else. Yeah, exactly. Then all of a sudden somebody else comes by, and I have this crew of people there, where she's my partner's in the driver's seat. It's like, okay, you don't have to push, and I got this crew of us back there, like, trying to push me out of the snowdrift, and we got back up on it, and I climb in the car and kind of get the rest. I still had another ways to go down this snow thing, like slipping and sliding, trying not to drive into a boulder or a tree,
Right.
And I got to the other side of it, get out, do a little celebration, and thank these mysterious people who showed up out of nowhere after I hadn't seen anybody for hours, Anyway, we go on our way, stop a few more spots. I think that whole day we found 3 morels. And it's the kind of day where you're going out expecting to come back with like 20, 30 pounds.
Right.
And I came back with 3 morels, and I was just amazed that she would ever talk to me again after that. but
and I think every mushroom hunter, everybody who's into foraging, has been on that journey. The effort is not commensurate with the reward, but you know what? Sometimes it still kind of is. Those are the 3 like most special morels.
Yeah.
Like, this wasn't totally for nothing. We found these 3 morels. Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us on the Mushroom Hour, sharing stories, sharing your culinary expertise. There is a second edition of the book coming out, so I want to put that on everyone's radar to go get more information. Where's the best website, social media, best place for people to follow you?
Okay, so my website is themushroomhunterskitchen.com. I'm actually out of hard copy books now as I'm working towards a second edition. There are still ebooks there if anybody wants them. The second edition, I'm working with a publisher called The Experiment, and it should be summer of 2025. Books should be available.
Excellent. Well, I encourage everyone to go to the website, check out the information, follow Chad, and you can find more Mushroom Hour at welcometomushroomhour.com to listen to our podcast library. Chad, thank you so much for joining us on the Mushroom Hour.
Thanks for having me.